So, we are live at the moment with Xpert Fact series brought to you by PROTEQme. And I'd like to start by thanking all our participants. But before I start thanking, I wanted to greet everybody. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're dialing in from. Thank you very much for making time to join us in our sessions of Xpert Fact series. We have three expert feature speakers today, which we're going to introduce very soon. But before we speak about our speakers, I just wanted to introduce the purpose and the objective of Xpert Facts. So Xpert Facts was designed and brought to all of you to create an awareness and to combat cybercrime. 2020 has brought in a lot of emerging threats, and 2021 seems to be taking a new turn. And our experts are going to actually talk about all the emerging threats as well as a look back on what 2020 has brought into our lives, especially in the industry of cyber world. What I'd like to do is very quickly introduce myself. So I'm the founder of PROTEQme, and this company is about a year old. And Expert Fact Series was launched along with PROTEQ to build that kind of awareness and create the kind of noise that we wanted to create in the market. We have today three experts, industry experts with us, professionals. So we have Mr. Zoltan, who's a professional internal audit expert and professional. He focuses on IT audit, risk management, and compliance, and he's going to bring an element of audit into the cyber world today during our session. We then have our senior partner of PROTEQ, Babak Esmaeli, who's also a programmer, malware analyzer, reverse engineer, and cybersecurity researcher, has been in the industry for over 2 decades. And then, of course, save the best for last, we have Jay Jay Davey, who's a cybersecurity professional and a blue team speaker professional with us today. So thank you all. Thank you, speakers, for your time and for the effort of coming into this session and educating our participants. What we would like to do is, it's a panel discussion, and it's the theme of today's session is a look back on 2020 and a looking forward to 2021. We are going to be taking on all the questions at the end of the session. So we've kind of allocated the last quarter of an hour to answer all the questions. And stay tuned till the end, because we have a surprise for all of you, because there's a challenge that we're going to be talking about, and there's a reward for the challenge that we're going to be launching and we're going to be talking about. So that's what's coming as at the end of the session and as a surprise for this session. So for starters, what I'd like to do is I'd like to maybe I give you guys a quick update. Maybe y'all can give us, our participants, a quick update on what do you think 2020 has looked like in the cyber world and in the cyber industry. So Jay, perhaps you want to start talking about why do individuals and corporates today need to worry about the information security, as most of them believe that they have an IT department. So is there a concern? Should they be worried about cyber information security as of today, whether it's individuals or corporates?
Yes, they do, because IT teams, it's a different skill set. IT is a different skill set to security. It's a different mindset altogether. IT, you're just making things work. You're making things work for the users. You're making things work for the business. But security, you bring that mindset where you make things secure for the business. So it doesn't just work; it works securely as well. And businesses are highly connected. They're using the internet to interact with customers. They store customer information in cloud services, databases, wherever it may be. We need to protect that with data protection. We need to make sure that we're using the right technical controls to protect this data from unauthorized access. So yes, there is an actual paramount need to have cybersecurity in a business, not just an IT department, because they can't do everything. And it just becomes stressful for them to be able to deal with making things work and balancing security.
Right. So thank you so much for that, Jay, because I work with a lot of corporates, and I know that a lot of corporates have an IT department, and they believe that if the information secure, so is the secure, the security area is equally secure because of the IT department. So thanks for clarifying that. Zoltan, when it comes to the audit space, how do you see a convergence or a divergence between information security or an IT audit versus a security audit?
Absolutely. What JJ mentioned is critical, that organizations have to distinguish between IT operations and IT security. So realistically, the IT security function has to be boosted because there is so much more exposure nowadays, especially with remote work. Endpoint security became a very hot topic. It was always out there, but now a lot of departments, we talk about front office, middle office, and back office, because of the pandemic, moved online. And this remote work environment created new challenges. And it's also impacted the IT audit function, because IT audit had to change their annual audit plan on the fly. So it wasn't planned that so many people would move into a remote work environment. And as a result of that, fundamentally, IT audit pushed back some audit mandates and prioritized others. Beyond that, obviously, there was a major impact on slowing down the audit execution, because auditors couldn't see their auditees and go through a detailed process descriptions and reviews. It all had to be done remotely. And we should not forget, because of this rapid velocity of change in the IT environment, the policies and procedures couldn't be updated. So IT audit couldn't work with the old policies and procedures because they didn't reflect the current working environment. And the new emerging risks were not integrated into these policies and procedures. So fundamentally, we had to fly blind a little bit, to use another phrase. So that was a major impact.
Thank you so much for that. And Babak, in your expert opinion, what do you think today individuals and corporates need to worry about when it comes to information security?
Yes, of course. So if you let me, well, I want to have a short explanation of what is information technology and what is information security. So many companies has IT departments that they do information technology services, but if we say information technology, we mean that information technology deals with deploying the technology that will help for the running and growth of a business. So IT department ensures that hardware, software, or other network components remain functional, whereas information security deals with security related issues, and it ensures that technology is secure and protected from possible breaches and attacks. So information security deals with protecting data. Both may sound similar, but they are in fact separate functions. Separate functions need separate jobs to be done, and that is why they need to be worried about it.
So, just in your expert opinion, what do you think are the, and this is a question to all three panelists, what do you think are the major skills difference between the IT and the information security experts or professionals within the organization? So, if a company needs to, because I don't see a lot of focus in the corporate world, especially when they hire people today during acquisition, there is no focus on cybersecurity or the knowledge or awareness of that or the skill sets around it. So what would you recommend should be, the focus as far as the skills are concerned for the corporates around, having more focus around the cybersecurity space?
I would say that fundamentally what is distinct that in cybersecurity, it's a control mindset. So what happens is the operations people focus on executing their operations functions. So IT operations make sure that all the program development, the migration is happening as planned, but they're not focusing on making sure all the controls are built into these applications and whether they are properly tested. It should be obviously part of it, but the control mindset it should come as tone of the top, and then IT governance should be championing it. So it's a critical piece because IT operations is bogged down with a lot of work. So obviously that somebody has to lead that effort to make sure that all these controls get properly designed and they are getting implemented. And IT audit comes into as an advisory role to make sure that those control design makes sense. And we're obviously going to test those controls.
Excellent. Jay, what do you think is the biggest difference in the skill set between an IT person and a cybersecurity person, in your view?
It's a different scope of awareness. So security personnel are aware of regulatory compliance, legal drivers towards the requirement for security, whereas IT personnel are more aligned to the vision of making things work effectively and efficiently for the business. So they enable the business to work and enable technology to work for the business, whereas security professionals need to make sure that the business complies with regulatory compliance. They protect the data that they hold, and the technology is working in a secure and safe manner.
Right. Babak, any words from you? between the different?
Yes, as Jay said, security deals with protecting data and assets, but information security or information technology deals with handling all those assets in order to serve for a service.
Right. So, what we'd also like to understand is, because we've got a few questions from our participants prior, they wanted to know what have been the biggest cybersecurity threats in 2020 and as you see them now. So, what do you think are the biggest cybersecurity related threats as of now? Jay, do you want to start?
So the threats remain the same. The only thing that's changed is the attack surface. So the COVID pandemic has forced people to adopt cloud services. They've forced people to remote work en masse. So the attack surface has completely changed. Now what we're seeing is threat actors are moving with that change and they're aligning their attacks with that change. So they're now attacking cloud services. They're finding new ways to attack remote workers. So on the flip side, the challenge to that is how do we secure remote workers and how do we train them properly to identify the threats and secure themselves, and how do we secure these cloud services? And if we have a security team, how do we give the security team visibility of what's in that cloud service so they can monitor it like it was on-prem?
Right. And Zoltan, what do you think this threat means to the audit world? And because we have a few participants who come from the audit and the compliance world as a part of this session, so what would be your view for them on emerging threats?
Changes to connect what Jay mentioned. What really happened is as employees moved off site and they do remote work, as we can see more and more instances of corporate culture problems. So the people element become even more relevant, because what happens if you have some bad actors inside the organization, being in a remote work environment, we even have less oversight over their activities. So it's in a way much more difficult to control what they are doing, whether they are abusing some of their access rights. Or actually, the monitoring tools become more critical, because when you are in an office environment, you are surrounded with other employees who could report certain activity. So this is not present in the remote work environment. So definitely the corporate culture and the human factor exposure, the internal threats become more difficult to detect because of the remote work environment. And I think companies should pay attention to that, because this is not the same. Obviously, after the pandemic, as you mentioned, 2021, as workers start to move back to the office environment, this risk would be slowly, gradually become less. But right now, I think the internal threat is also relevant, more exposure than before, actually.
Thank you for that. Babak, any views on what do you think have been like the biggest threats or the changing landscapes of 2020?
Yes, of course. As Zoltan and Jay mentioned, by growing the online and remote working, there are many new threats that are targeting individuals these days. So I just want to specifically mention some kind of attacks that are growing up at 2020 until now, and we are seeing them in 2021. So growth of client-side attacks like phishing attacks, which target individuals, employees, instead of targeting application server or whatever remote server. Also, we are seeing acceleration in ransomware attacks and SCADA attacks, which target critical infrastructure industries in countries. We are seeing some other kind of attacks like IoT attacks. Let me explain what is IoT. The Internet of Things, or IoT, refers to the billions of physical devices around the world that are connected to the internet, all connecting and sharing data like smart home devices, cars, etc. So the huge amount of new attacks are being I mean, companies are being attacked every day. Hello.
Thank you, Babak, for that. Because I think there was some prayers going on, so I was putting myself on mute. Okay, so very quickly, what I wanted to understand is that as per the threat management survey, it was found that most enterprises are not confident in their security posture, right? And that staffing is a major issue limiting IT security effectiveness. What we wanted to understand is from you panelists, if a company feels that they don't have designated or trained information security experts on their staff or on their payroll, or third-party trusted information advisors, how would that impact their organization? Or do you see an impact of not having that kind of training or awareness, or a third-party advisor who's an expert, a subject matter expert, to kind of partner with them and take them to the next steps? Would you see that as a challenge?
Yes. So organizations don't necessarily look at cybersecurity threats. They normally look at how can they promote their business, build their brand reputation, make sales, and essentially make a business at the end of the day. That's what they're designed to do. So they don't have anyone that's going, hey, who's going to attack our business? What's our threats? What's our threat to our business? What's our threat to our asset? And that's when a cybersecurity professional really comes into their own kind of genre. They come in and they look at a business from a different perspective. They look at the business to say, well, what could be attacked? What could be the impact of this attack? How can we mitigate the impact? How can we mitigate the risk? And this is really where organizations should be onboarding some sort of security professional to audit their business and understand what risk exposure does their business have, and how could it be reduced? Because you're not going to know if your business is being attacked by hackers, by threat actors, if you've got no one that's able to understand, let's say, firewall logs. We look at firewall logs, we're seeing, different kinds of attacks every single day, especially if you've got a web server sitting behind a firewall, you can see people doing SQL injection attacks. But if you don't have somebody with that kind of mindset, you're not going to have that visibility, you're not going to have that knowledge that you're under attack. So it's very important.
Thanks for that. So Zoltan, how would you see training and awareness as a piece that would fit into the corporate world, especially when it comes to audit? Because I know, like I said, I work with a lot of large corporates, and right from onboarding to, whatever it is, there is no emphasis on cyberspace at all. It's mostly compliance. So when you're talking about regulatory issues, it's mostly compliance. It's not so much the cyberspace that companies focus on. How do you see that as an auditor, as a challenge?
Well, in Singapore lately, they introduced cyber hygiene, one of the monetary authority of Singapore requirements. So financial institutions that are regulated by the MAS, fundamentally, they have to comply with the regulatory requirements. But obviously, these are principle-based regulations. So this comes down to the training and element. What's supposed to happen that you have a cybersecurity expert, compliance, and IT audit work in cooperation to interpret those regulatory requirements and translate it in actual design of controls. Ultimately, that has to be developed, built into the different procedures. And once this is in place, then IT audit has to audit that. So that's basically, that's supposed to happen. The problem is it's very difficult to make a distinction whether this effort or initiative is purely kind of make sure that we're ticking the boxes and we are in compliance, or we go in depth, because there is a big distinction there. And that's where the expertise is needed. And companies have to recognize that within the IT domain, so many specialized skill set is there. You have network engineers, you have all the software engineers, all separate domains that you have to have the best expert in place, and then the audit professional together to create that framework that controls your IT exposure or IT cybersecurity risk. So fundamentally, this is a major step up, and I think people are available. That skill set is out there. Companies just have to recognize they have to invest in it, and it's critical, because otherwise they're gonna get hacked. They're gonna have enormous reputational damages, and social engineering attacks, for instance. If we are looking at how much it's proliferated in the past couple of years, and organizations try to train their people, but if you have 40% employee turnover, what's your hope? Training the people, you don't even have a schedule where you can cover it. So that comes down as well, the human factor. You have to make sure you have a stable core of employees who are trained and they know about social engineering.
Yes.
So it's a complex topic. It's all interrelated.
Absolutely. And Babak, your views on training and awareness in any organization?
Yeah, that is necessary to my viewpoint. But what I want to mention is that having a trained information security team is not enough in a company. I would say we need both. I mean, a third-party trusted information security advisor. Uh, you know why? The cyber attacks are getting more sophisticated these days. Although many organizations have scheduled periodical pen testing by their internal teams in order to find their weaknesses, in cybersecurity, there are always threats that remain unseen, to my experience. So having a third party trusted information security or risk advisor at least seems essential to my idea.
Excellent. So the next question that we had from our participants in advance was that what is the difference between data protection and privacy? Because a lot of companies today have data, and a lot of companies are collecting data. A lot of websites are collecting data, right? So what is the difference between data protection and privacy? Jay.
So I'm going to strip it down. So data protection to me is a technical function. How do we stop unauthorized access to data? How do we stop unauthorized access to objects that may contain private information, may contain company IP? That's, to me, is data protection. We protect that data. Data privacy for me is it's more of a legal aspect. It's how do we, what are the laws pertaining to data protection and data privacy in that matter? So something like GDPR for EU residents. But what we're starting to see is a lot of countries are now starting to understand what data privacy is and understand that it's actually a requirement. So we're starting to see more data privacy laws pop out of the woodwork. We've seen recently in the past 10, 15 years that America have started to take quite a big stance on data privacy, and it's continuing to grow. But I think it's growing too slowly. I think we need to move a little bit quicker and protect privacy legally at a quicker pace.
Excellent. Babak?
Yes, I think they are separate things completely to my idea, because data privacy is concerned with proper handling, processing, storage, or whatever related to personal information, whereas data security is focused on protecting those personal data from any unauthorized third party access or malicious attack or whatever. In reality, what I say is that we cannot rely on the websites promises about data protection. We are seeing many of them get hacked every day. So even if we are very aware about cybersecurity, again, we can be our data can be compromised by those websites. So we should share minimal amount of information online in order to protect our privacy. I think the whole internet should go some kind of, I mean, a big change of decentralizing the data rather than centralizing it somewhere on a specific website.
Right. Zoltan, what's your view on, from the audit perspective, on privacy versus protection of data?
Well, inside organizations, how IT audit usually looks at it is that we really look at the fact whether information classification is properly designed. So, the different confidentiality levels. And then privacy, we look at it from the perspective whether certain departments' information cannot be accessed by people who shouldn't have access. No, we're looking at inside the organization. So even inside the organization, there is certain information that has different security level. And we make sure that the people with the right access rights have access to that. And we also make sure that they minimize the number of people who have access. So audit looks at it that we're trying to minimize the least amount of people should have access to the information. The information security classification is appropriate. And beyond that, people who should not have access to that classified information are definitely don't have the access. So we systematically audit these elements of information security and information confidentiality, but confidentiality inside the organization. So exposure to certain department employees, temporary hires, outside third parties who have access to the system to a limited level. Yeah.
So there's a quick question from me, just out of curiosity, because obviously with everything that has happened in 2020, a lot of banks, for example, or financial institutions have moved into this two double authenticated password or whatever. How secure or protected do you think is your data with that kind of approach? It's just a question at the top of my head.
Yeah, let me say it depends. It depends on the data protection policy that they are using or what backend database security solution they are using. But we are seeing again every day that many big websites like FireEye is one of the biggest security company in the world, and it just got compromised, data leaked out. So no one can promise you, or no technology can promise you, because individuals are engaged themselves. We are talking about employees in their company, okay? So the employees has some kind of non-disclosure agreement with the company itself. But if they take out the data, what happens, you know? So no one can guarantee that, to my idea.
Jay, any views on this double password authentication process and stuff that the financial institutions are implementing at the moment or not?
From a security perspective, if we're talking about authentication, then multiple factors of authentication is always going to be the best way to go in terms of protecting that data or protecting access to that data. But when it comes to the underlying control of that data and the storage, transmission, and whatever it may be of that data, that stems down to the security stance of that company and how serious do they take it. So it's going to be one of those things. It's going to be a very opinionated kind of topic, but I like to see banks have a strong stance on authentication and a strong stance on data protection as a whole.
Excellent. Zoltan, any views?
Well, what has been said, I'm also very positive. These changes are definitely favorable. Multi-factor authentication. I'm more looking at the IT audit is getting concerned about companies who do, as they expand globally, they try to do online onboarding of clients and identification in that environment. A KYC process is where our concerns are. So that's something that, a lot of companies from Singapore, for instance, onboard clients online directly from China. And this is not an easy process where identification, proper identity, validation and verification can be ensured. So it's not the specific question you raised where, it might be a transactional authentication process, but this is about very front end when they identify potential new clients and onboard based on online platforms. That's most of a concern for IT audit at this point.
Right. So having done a look back for 2020, we wanted to know basically what do you foresee as challenges in 2021? What do you think cybersecurity, area as an industry is going to bring as challenges either for individuals or for the organizations or for the industry overall? Do any of you all have a view as to what challenges can we be looking forward to? Jay? Yes, I can see you nodding your head.
Yeah, so it's burning in my head, and it's the topic on everyone's tongue. It's third-party risk. We are now adopting these cloud services. We're adopting these third-party services. Third-party risk is massive, and I don't even need to mention the name to know what I'm talking about. But a big supply chain attack has happened in December, November time. Absolutely huge. Impact was devastating for many businesses. Massive impact on the stock market, and that's due to third-party risk. So you may have all the eggs in your basket, but who's got other eggs that belong to you that you have loaned them that egg? You need to understand where are all your services, who's controlling your data, who's processing your data, where are your where are your loyalties? You need to understand who are you working with, what's their security stance like, what do they do to protect your data and protect access? Because at the end of the day, if your third party gets breached and it impacts you, their breaches impact your brand and impact your security, and you've got to respond to that threat. You've got to respond to that incident as well. So third-party risk is absolutely massive, and it's going to continue to be massive in 2021 as well.
Yeah, I think that's very common for the compliance piece also where I come from, because I think So many people focus on their clients and stuff, but third party is absolutely a neglected area. So I 100% agree with you on that one. Zoltan, any views on for you on the challenges that 2021 is going to bring for us from audit space?
For
I think Zoltan's frozen. Babak, you want to kick off since he's
Yes,
frozen?
yes, of course. So what I think is that the cybersecurity industry needs more innovative solutions in 2021. To be honest, the cyber attacks are getting more complex and advanced, and they are involving individual.
professionals, because
Yes,
a lot
yes.
of companies those companies went on got listed, and ultimately that's a major impact for the demand of IT audit services. And there expected to be a lot of turnover in IT audit staff. That's going to be more challenging to execute audits and transfer the skill set for the new hires. And the other issue is the hiring process, because historically it used to be typically interviews, face-to-face meetings to hire new employees, but now everything moved off online. And it's questionable whether the corporate culture problems we talked about earlier, whether this is going to be exacerbated or it's going to be more enhanced due to the hiring practices had to adapt to the new environment. So it's going to be time will tell whether companies made the right choices when they hired in this pandemic environment, whether HR did the right decisions. So it's going to be multiple factors impacting IT audit overall, and it's going to be a challenging year, that's for sure.
Thank you. Sorry, Babak. You want to also continue from there?
Yeah, I was just talking about the data leaks and breaches cannot be stopped just by the technology itself. I mean, cybersecurity cannot use the technology alone in order to stop those breaches. Cybersecurity industry, to my idea, needs to move to a newer level and find new ways to protect both individuals and systems. On the other hand, organizations should be trained and be ready for incident responses in 2020, in 2021, okay? And their employees should be aware of cybersecurity awareness more than ever.
So, with that in mind, what do you panelists think were the biggest lessons or one big lesson of 2020? Because we've seen Facebook, Twitter, big giants like Zoom getting hacked and data being leaked, right? So, what do you think was the biggest lesson in 2020? And going forward, what is the one tip you would like to give our participants for 2021?
So I think the biggest challenge was, or the biggest lesson is identify your assets, identify where your business is in the internet. Are you in the cloud? Okay, what's in the cloud? Identify your assets and protect those assets. Threat model your organization to the different threats out there and understand how you can protect yourself from those threats. That's what we need to be doing. We need to have more of a proactive mindset. If we're adopting the cloud, we need to treat it as kind of a fortress of data. We need to layer these different protections there, make sure you enable all the protective controls, because at the end of the day, it's just a login portal now between that threat actor and the access to that data. So how you protect that is completely up to you, but make sure that you do protect it.
Right. And Zoltan, what do you think has been the biggest challenge from the audit space, and what is the one tip you can give our corporates and individuals on the line today for 2021?
The biggest challenge was the fast adaptation to the new environment, to the remote work. So it's definitely impacted the execution of audits, slowed it down. Audit requires interactions with the auditees because those discussions are fundamental. They disclose a lot of information that you realize the policies and procedures are actually not covering. It's just not there. So it's absolutely crucial to have that interaction. What Jay Jay mentioned also is that the cloud service providers exposure is exploding. So IT audit has to be aware of that and adapt and see how we can adjust our IT audit schedule to make much bigger focus on the cloud service providers and any outsourced third-party service provider, because this is definitely an emerging area. And ultimately, I think companies should, for next year, take advantage of the benefit of remote work. I would think that if remote work for instance, from an IT audit standpoint, worked, then why cannot be global remote work? And you get access to the best talent in the world. So I think that could be eye-opening. If companies would realize that you can hire the best talent tomorrow morning, if it's remote work, it can be anywhere in the planet. And that way, those actions that we want to make sure that we control our assets and protect our assets, it's going to be more professionally done because you just really hire specialized experts for each and every domain. And I think that's an opportunity.
So, Babak, any views on what do you think was the biggest?
Yes, I am completely agree with JJ and Zoltan, and I want to add another important thing to my idea is that we should keep training for cybersecurity awareness for our employees or individuals. That is very important. Again, we are seeing many attacks that uh, is done. They are using phishing attacks in order to spread malware in the network of organizations. So if the user of that system were aware about cybersecurity, that incident wouldn't happen. So it's very important to have trainings.
Right. So somebody is asking, saying that what would be your views on AML, a moving target, to be on the offensive? So I know, again, working with a lot of corporates, and especially from the compliance perspective, I know there's a lot of focus on AML per se because of the previous regulatory breaches and penalties that have been levied on them, right? Cyberspace hasn't evolved as much as far as the compliance area is concerned. What are your views on that, on compliance staff, being upskilled on the cyberspace and stuff like that? There's a question in chat saying, how does that work? Jay, any ideas? I think you spoke about looking left and looking right when you cross the road, right?
Yeah. So the problem is that when you roll out of bed, you're connected to the internet. You grab your phone, you connect to the internet. It's become such a part of everyone's life that even when you go to work, you're still on the internet. When you leave, you're on the internet. So I think just like when you cross the road, you look both ways. You look for that oncoming car. You're looking for that threat. You're looking for that danger, and then you cross the road. I think we should have this kind of mindset when we connect to the internet. We should be aware of the dangers, aware of the threats, and understand how we can identify them. So that's why we need to train people, but make it personal. Make it so they can take something home with them. Because once they start to practice it in their everyday life, thinking, oh, should I click on that? That could be dangerous. It becomes more of an instinct. And then they bring that instinct into work, and then they start to act more securely. I think the age of PowerPoint presentation based security training is dead. It needs to become more personal.
Right. Um, any views, Zoltan, from your end on AML versus cybersecurity, especially when it comes to compliance teams?
What I've seen in EML transaction monitoring, for instance, in different financial services firms, is that they use certain, sometimes third-party vendors to identify, for instance, a politically exposed person, or you're looking at suspicious transaction monitoring. So there are tools for that, but the question becomes back again to the training. So many times what I've seen that these EML transaction monitoring responsibilities has been delegated down to the department level. Now, if those department level employees are this high turnover, 40%, 50%, they don't have the knowledge training. So they might have the training of using the tools, but they don't know the AML transaction patterns beyond using the tool. So they don't see the forest from the trees many times. And that's a problem. So the question becomes, the compliance design, the AML monitoring framework, and many times this delegation happens to the department levels, and then the department employees report up suspicious transactions to compliance, who is going to evaluate it and ultimately report to the monetary authority of Singapore in this case, for instance. That's ultimately the call of compliance. But the department level skill set and knowledge is critical. And companies have to invest in that, not only the tools. So I find that companies many times confuse skills with knowledge. It's not the same thing. Skills you learn in 3 months. Knowledge takes you 5 years. That's two different things. Of course, the two goes hand in hand. but I think many times it's oversimplified. We look after flashy skills and we forget about knowledge.
Babak, what has been your view versus compliance versus cybersecurity?
Yeah, I agree with the guys. Jay said exactly that training is the key. So I'm completely agree. He covered everything. As Zoltan said again about the tools and the trainings, everything. So what I think is that again, training, I emphasize on that because training is the most important thing because as a malware analyzer, I can say that more 99% of the attacks are targeting individuals, not systems. Not Yeah, we have zero-day exploits, but they are very rare. So most of the malwares are targeting individuals. Training is essential thing for the companies.
So there's been a question in the chat saying, do you think that organizations have forgotten the basics? Jay's
Definitely,
nodding his head. Why,
100%.
Jay?
So I think, you know, we see every day a news article comes up saying, oh, this attack is sophisticated. But when you read between the lines, it's not actually a sophisticated attack. It's a misconfiguration somewhere. Somebody's left a control off. Somebody's made a S3 bucket public. And it's like, some of these things are actually basic security. When you look at it, they're what their best practices, what an organization should be doing when they exercise due diligence and due care. They should be doing these things. Such as patching, stuff like that is kind of like the security basics. I know for big organizations, patching can be a very difficult task, but it's definitely something that they should be doing anyway. And when it comes to cloud services, now that we're relying on them so much, we should be doing the basics in terms of cloud security, authentication control, access control lists to different objects, making sure that the data can only be accessed by authorized individuals. Just basic stuff like this. We don't have to go advanced with all these green screen matrix hacks. We need to just think, how do we stop the basic attacks? How do we reduce our risk?
Right. There's been another question in the chat. It says that in 2020 we've seen many ransomware attacks, and in December we had a big supply chain attack. What do you think will be the title for the biggest cyber attack in 2021?
I'm not going to hold my breath. I think we're in for. I think 2021 we're going to be in for a ride, because what happened in December is not over yet. We're going to see new malware. We're going to see new ransomware based on the source code and the tools that were leaked. Especially whereas the FireEye tools, they got leaked. They're going to be used now in different attacks. So they're going to enable attackers to attack better, more efficiently, more effectively. So we're going to see some more sophisticated attacks, but we're going to see some new variants of ransomware, new variants of malware. So I think we're in for a ride, and I'm not going to call out what's the biggest attack just yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say there are many botnets around the world that they are working since let's say 2009 until now. So we cannot say what was the biggest attack, because we haven't seen many of those big attacks yet. So let's say advanced persistent threats groups are doing their job for many years now. I mean, they have penetrated to the systems of governments around the world, and they are silently doing their job. So many of those big attacks haven't seen yet, let's say.
So, so there's another question. Zoltan, sorry, your views on this?
Actually, I wanted to connect to we forget about the basic stuff. I completely agree with JJ that there are sometimes the mistakes you see is like surprising. How can they miss it? It's so basic. But I think that many big companies, the root cause why they miss fundamental security issues is because they grow with mergers and acquisitions. So the problem with that, when you acquire these new companies, you have these legacy systems, you cannot roll out your policies and procedures on time. And the attacker is obviously going to attack your new platform, the newly acquired company. You're going to go in from that door, because the controls could be weaker. So the reality is that very heavy mergers and acquisition activity creates enormous exposure, because it's impossible that the companies you're acquiring at high speed going to have the same standards, policies, and procedures and basic IT security controls that you have. Either it's better or worse, but many times it's worse, and then you don't have enough time to implement, and you're going to get an attack surface right there. So I think that's, and I see that a lot in the financial services is more typical to grow with acquisition. So you have companies all over the place, different, very decentralized organizational structures, where that creates an exposure.
All right, so I'm going to read out the next one, which is a fairly long one. So pay attention. So somebody's written in the Q&A saying, security in the cloud is at risk. The SolarWinds breach is a perfect example of the lack of basic security principles not being applied, causing an impact on which we have only seen the tip of the iceberg so far. Question: are there any plans to take serious actions against third-party service providers should they cause an impact with the magnitude as we are currently witnessing in the state-nation cyber attack on SolarWinds? And then there's another question along with that, so I'll read that later. But the first question is, obviously, somebody is looking for some kind of an opinion on, is there, is there going to be some responsibility, some accountability, with everything that's happening, that's going on? Do you have any views about that?
So I think that in response to this, big security organizations, whether it be SANS, NIST, NCSC, depending on where you are, they need to advise cloud users and people that implement the cloud that the data is attacked differently, the access is attacked differently. You're not in this archaic perimeter of a network in the office anymore. Your data is essentially in someone else's computer, as a lot of people say. It's somebody else's computer. So we need to understand, how do we protect it if it's all the way over there? So we need to make sure that we are applying the same kind of basic principles. The cloud, at the end of the day, security is a mindset, but we need to make sure that we have almost like a checklist of what should we be doing to protect this data. We have like stuff like ISO 27001, information security management systems. How do we apply this to the cloud? How do we make sure that we can have like a cloud security management system? Best practices, the 90 top 10 tips to securing your cloud. I think the real bugbear is there's so many different cloud providers. They have different security controls for each individual provider, whereas AWS might have guard duty, Google might have something else. So we need to start looking, well, how do we kind of have a single song sheet that we can all sing from when it comes to cloud? So then I totally agree that we should do more.
Awesome. Babak, Zoltan, any views on the question?
Well, I think the IT governance function has to boost their skill set and knowledge fundamentally of the SLAs they are signing. Because the issue is these cloud services came online pretty fast, and those contracts are favoring the service provider, not the client. So there is a lot of built-in requirement we can build into the SLAs, but you need to, IT governance in the different organizations has to boost their knowledge and have negotiate those contracts with more security built in. So I think that's the first step. So JJ is completely right. Those security measures has to be identified, but IT governance role is to represent those values and those requirements in the SLEs they are negotiating. And I don't think they're negotiating well at this point right now, because it's just too new and people don't know what they should have in there. So that's my sense at this point.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course. Look, what I want to say about cloud services, again, as the guys mentioned, it is too new. I mean, and the new services like cloud services need rapid development. So whatever that needs rapid development, it may have many bugs, many problems. So we should take care of what cloud service we are using. We should pay attention to those we use, that we are sure that at least the company has a good reputation in cybersecurity and protection.
Okay. So following question on the same attack on SolarWinds is, who should be the big brother to ensure that appropriate action will be taken when there was a lack of privy basic governance and compliance controls? Jay is very happy to get that question on board. Yes, Jay, over to you to answer that.
So I think it really depends on your location. I mean, certainly for the UK, if you have a data breach of any kind and you're investigated by the ICO and you're found to not have the relevant due diligence and you're not displaying due care in your protection against cyber threats or data protection, then you will be punished for that. However, I think that the message isn't when you have this punitive action, when you have these fines, the message isn't clear enough. A lot of organisations, it's pocket money for them. So I think the real driver here is how do we make the punishment severe enough that organisations will feel the impact. There's a ripple effect of, let's just say, company A gets breached, massive amounts of money because it's a punitive fine, and they get stripped away of certain objects. There's going to be a ripple effect to that. Other businesses are going to be like, okay, we don't want to be in that position. How do we protect ourselves and not end up like that? But I think it really depends on where you are. So in the UK, definitely we have the ICO. They would go in and they would do their bit. But I think there needs to be a bit more of a global driver, maybe a global kind of initiative to it.
Right. Babak, Zoltan, any views?
No, I don't have any.
My perspective is that basically the company who suffered the attack, the service provider reputation is obviously damaged because of the incident. So there is going to be, that beyond maybe regulatory fines, definitely a reputational risk materialized in this case. The other question is whether in the service level agreement, the clients who use the service provider, what is their rights for data transfer? So to move their data to another service provider. And this sometimes is not well negotiated in SLAs as well. So you might be logged in more than you think you are. So that becomes a question, because if this incident happened, all other users of this service provider could move their data to another service provider, and then, fundamentally major financial impact for the organization.
Right. Okay, so I think that's about it with the questions. Lots of comments over here saying, Zoltan very well said, knowledge is the foundation from which we all build skills. So hiring companies are overlooking that fact. So people are very happy with the kind of session we've had today. One word of advice or one big tip you can give our participants for 2021.
Identify your critical assets, threat model them, understand what's going to attack you, and protect against those threats. And remember that cybersecurity is an ongoing process. It changes every single day, week by week. It's a different thing. The attacks are different, the malware is different. You need to keep on top of it, keep yourself updated. So follow news feeds, follow trends, and make sure that you're aligning yourself to those trends and your protective controls up to date, and they're protecting yourselves from these new threats that are being realized.
Thank you for that, Jay. Babak, any tips for 2021 for our viewers, our participants?
Oh, no, again, I want to say that in 2021, we are seeing a revolution in cybersecurity. I predict that to my idea. And what I want to add is that we should be very aware of new kind of attacks in 2021. Ransomware will grow up much more, and client-side attacks, to my idea, will be more than ever.
Zoltan, any last words of wisdom?
Basically, I see it from the audit standpoint is that the 3 lines of defense used to work in silos. And I think the world is changing so rapidly. We require more interaction between compliance, IT audit, IT operations, IT governance, because regulatory changes, for instance, because of the fintech companies, all the different payment platforms that are proliferating right now require new thinking of how compliance is going to turn those regulatory requirements into policies and procedures, and how internal audit ultimately is going to audit that. So I think there is a requirement to have much more interaction between those specific domains inside the organization due to the rapid changes. And so the silo thinking, I think it's probably not going to work in this rapidly changing environment.
Awesome. So I just wanted to thank all of you all panelists for your time. What we want to do is just for our participants who've been online, and we wanted to kind of launch something as a challenge for them. So I want people to watch that space. My senior partner Babak is going to give a little brief about the challenge. So I know, Jay, you have a lot of your associates online who are waiting to do that. So the challenge is about one of the new technologies that we've created under PROTEQme. It's a brand new technology that we've developed, and it's a technology that doesn't just protect data; it actually hides data. And what we are doing is we are putting out a challenge with a reward for anybody to crack that technology and give us proof of concept that you could do it, and you can have this $4 million worth of technology for free. So I'm going to hand over the stage to my senior partner, Babak, to give you a little more brief about the challenge and the technology. So Babak, over to you.
Thank you. So we all see the protection tools, softwares, algorithms everywhere that they encrypt the data and protect it with some kind of passwords, whatever. We were thinking about to making something in order not to only protect data but hide it, make it invisible. So the crackers or hackers should first find the data in order to break it, whatever algorithm it is using. So this is the way that it works. We get some files, some data, whatever kind of files that you have. We will protect them and hide them in another file. Okay, so we have done that. We made a video. In the video itself, there are some other files. So you can download the video, watch the video, and try to break and extract out those kind of data.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is just to further come to the end of the session, we're going to launch this challenge through a video. The video will give you instructions of what you need to do and how you need to do. Inside the video, like Babak said, is something hidden, some data that's hidden. And it's a challenge to everybody out there, all of you, to the best minds in the world and the best hackers in the world. If you can extract the data which is hidden in the video, this technology of data protection is yours, right? So it's a very disruptive thing. We wanted to start with a massive disruption in 2021, and it goes two ways. Challenge goes two ways. At the moment, we have hidden our data, but we are also happy to take on a challenge from you. So if you guys have any data that you want to test us on and you want us to protect it and hide it for you, we are happy to do that. And we're happy to give it back to you. And if you're the Googles of the world or the IBMs or the Amazons of the world, you can take it to your best team to get that data unhidden and cracked. And if you can do that, the technology is yours. So watch this space for the challenge that we're going to be launching. Babak, is there anything else you want to say before we move on and say thank you to everybody?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something about the technology. So we have a steganography tool everywhere, but it has totally a different new thing that can use file blockchaining technology. So it has unlimited. It can be used to hide and protect unlimited number of files in just one file. That is the difference between that.
So I think with that, we don't have any more questions. So we'll come to an end. I think we are pretty much on time also. I just wanted to thank all the participants, but more importantly, thank all of you speakers. Thank you so much for making this time and coming into this session. The whole purpose of Xpert F.A.C.T.S is to create that awareness and to combat cybercrime. So I really appreciate your support in making my dreams come true and all our dreams come true. So thank you so much, Jay. Thank you, Zoltan. Thanks, Babak. Couldn't have done this without you guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You.
Brilliant. Thank you.
The
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.